Welcome back to That's Entertainment, the weekly entertainment show. I've got special guest Nathalie Lethbridge from Atonik.
Thank you, Ben. It's always a real pleasure to talk to you about what's happening at the moment. And there is always at the moment a lot happening in various parts of the entertainment ecosystem. So great to be here.
Today, I wanted to just break away and really focus on the cinema side of the industry. So we've just recently had CinemaCon, a lot of very important.
Yes, indeed. It's a great time to talk about where things are at, because that was a good point of reference for the summary of what's been happening over the last year. The runaway success of Super Mario Brothers has sort of bolstered a lot of people. The fact that the Omdia report recently reported that the top 10 cinema releases globally are now back at 2017 levels, potentially very close to 2019 levels. There was apparently a real sense that cinema's back and that the cinema experience is important, boosted, of course, by David Zaslav's huge appearance there, in which he talked about very emotionally about his personal link to theatrical and how Warner Brothers was a cinema first studio, which is, of course, somewhat of a departure from the days of Jason Kilar. Some of the figures that we're seeing suggest that there might be, that inflated prices are an issue, so that works for top 10 box office, but below that we see a radical drop, and certainly not to pre-COVID times. So that impacts, of course, independence very, very, very specifically. So there's a lot.
We have an environment where the hits are still hitting, but the independents, everything sort of mid-tier seems to be really struggling at the moment.
The big question is, what does it take to build to bring audiences in outside of the blockbusters, and how do you keep them in and coming back? And we've talked about pricing, and there was some issue of whether the cinema needs to adopt a dynamic pricing strategy. There's talk about experientially what happens in cinemas proper. What's the experience? What are they trying to build? Because there's been a lot of discontent with that. And the very idea of the value of the theatrical window, which people have been talking about a lot.
Just the recommitment to cinema as being a primary distribution platform. I think Disney Plus is also pushing towards using their blockbusters as a driver.
And let's not forget that the tentpoles and the blockbusters, the revenue impact there is not just in terms of the actual theatrical experience and then watching it elsewhere. There's also all the brand and the merchandising that goes behind those. And so, brand awareness is a critical component of that, that whole value chain. And it's important, therefore, to have a big splash in terms of building that mega brand awareness. And it's difficult to have that, it seems, from a purely streaming release. You don't get the same halo that spreads out into your parks, your consumer goods, and everything else.
One of the things that's going on, I think, across quite a few countries in Europe is that, actually the total number of tickets being sold has been gently declining since before 2010. My feeling is that the process of going to the cinema is becoming increasingly, or perceived as becoming increasingly, inconvenient.
You're right. I think it takes a lot to pull people in, which is why the tentpole movies will, because there's a whole experiential thing around being in there and sharing the experience of those big blockbusters, but why it's a lot harder for the next layer of movies to break in theatrical.